Can you hear me? Can you see my video? Did I stop that? Okay. All right. Good evening. Thank you for the. I appreciate it. I just want to start off first with I think I sent you my slide in reference to the crime as it relates to the Northern District. If you can put that up, I guess at some point. Um, but I would first like to say, like, a key component of the police commissioner's crime reduction plan is strong community partnerships. This partnership is essential to moving Baltimore forward, and as we erase the generational curses that we all have experienced. So first and foremost, I want to thank each of you for the part you played in reducing crime and forging relationship with and for BPD. One of the questions that I was asked to discuss today was how has the pandemic impacted crime? The pandemic has had a slight impact on crime as more people are homebound, but has also allowed us to focus on historically problematic areas. The crime we have experienced had a marked increase, which was aggravated assaults, which a vast majority were domestic related in nature. The normal outlets people were accustomed to are no longer available or limited in nature. We have stressed outside resources to community members who have experienced conflict in the home. Whenever it's possible, I provide my office to provide resources to community members to deal with that conflict, such as the House of Ruth, our own Family Crimes Unit, NAMI, and Black Mental Health Alliances. Whenever possible, I try to talk to the adults about ACEs. That's the adverse childhood experiences, right? But those adverse childhood experiences has a propensity to mold us as adults, and in some cases carry on generational curses. So breaking this cycle can be life-saving in many situations. It's important that we all look at the incidents that happen around us. If you can mentor a young person in your neighborhood, give an elderly person a helping hand. Those are the things how we rebuild the relationships within a community that makes Baltimore a community city. Have there been any correlation between crime and COVID-19? And I just talked about that. The major crime spike that we saw was aggravated assaults, which I said were domestic related. So aggravated assaults are normally assaults where the injuries are more severe than just smack on the hand. They require hospitalization or transport to the hospital to deal with those injuries. Are there any considerable changes in property and violent crime? As I talked, the property crimes have decreased if you look at the numbers. And the violent crimes, last year we ended up almost even what we did in 2019. That was from a strong push from our officers and the community involvement and community engagement, which led from like tips, people coming into the station, and just those strong partnerships that the Northern District is known for. People want the Northern District to be a safe place that we all can live, work, and play. So when you talked about the partnership on York Road and the traffic study, I'm looking forward to see how that works, and that we get the input from both sides of York Road on what they would see or would want to see for the community as a whole, and not just one side, because we all have to live and work in these particular areas. And when you put a thing, you'd be surprised how a speed bump can either help or hurt a neighborhood. And those are questions that I think need to be asked at the multitude of communities that you have, from the county line all the way down to 25th Street where we border at. Because you just got to think about it. When you come into the 4th District, it's not like it's a singular place. It's surrounded by other districts and other communities. So coming into the district, we need to just keep in mind that other communities can be affected by what we do in the 4th District. DeWeese Park is a great idea to revitalize a lot of people, such as Safe Streets and community, and some of the young people in the neighborhood that play games at baseball or softball games. And before COVID, we talked about a police versus the community game that we just couldn't do because of COVID. How has BPD operations shifted since the pandemic? Well, I would say our deployment initiative have changed slightly as a result of COVID and social distancing. The where and why has seen little adjustment based on crime data, but the how was modified slightly to ensure the safety of the citizens and our officers. For instance, there are places where it's been known for it to have a high rate of COVID within a specific building. So we respond to that sort of differently, but we do respond. If it's a building, say an apartment building that's not really regulated, we try to get the respondents or the complainants to meet us outside as opposed to us going into each and every apartment. And that way, I know sometimes people don't want to do that, but we got to think about the safety of the citizens and our officers because COVID is real. I think we've all experienced someone who's had it. I haven't personally had the trauma of having someone pass from it, but several of my officers have been very sick from COVID and felt like they were going to die. I think I've got the shot a couple weeks ago, and just the symptoms or that I got from the shot was more than what I expected. So I can imagine a person who has COVID what they will actually go through. We aren't going to change because it's working. As you can see, the crime reduction is steadily going down. So for us, green is good, red is bad. The one homicide that we had was in reference, it's closed now. It was domestic related in reference to the young lady that was murdered and dumped in Druryville Park. We took a big stance at making the park a safer place than it has been traditionally. I know a lot of times, during the day the park is great, but at night is when the things come out. So we're working with Rex and Parks and the director of Rex and Parks to try to address the park in a different way that we've done historically, and it's been pretty successful so far. How has the district adjusted to the much-needed quarantine procedures as officers are exposed? We have strict protocols in reference to officers who've been exposed or test positive for COVID. There are sanitizing and restoration processes that we follow if a person is exposed or test positive for COVID. Everyone is mandated to wear masks. Vehicles are sanitized daily at shift change, and officers are required to wear masks while in all public spaces, regardless of the location, be it a police building or a public building. Every day when the officers come in, they get their temperature checked and it's documented. It's also a daily survey they must take to notify anyone of any potential symptoms that they may have, from a sniffle to body aches to fatigue or headache. So the unit per se makes the call in reference whether you're quarantined or not. And quarantine can go from anywhere from 5 to 14 days, depending on the type of exposure. So far, we've been lucky that, like I said, we've not lost anyone from COVID, but I would say maybe 40% of the district has been exposed, has had a COVID exposure, and maybe 20 to 30% have been quarantined up until this point. You have any questions?
So thank you, Captain Shu. We're going to take questions at the end.
Okay.
Thank you so much, though.
All your questions. I see you smiling, so I hope I was hitting on your points that you already had.
Yes. Thank you so much. So for the audience, Captain Shorter went through the questions that we sent for each panelist to consider while giving their remarks, and he just went through each one. And so thank you for that. That was awesome. And so after Captain Shorter, we'll have Jeffrey Ambrose from the Health Department speak to us today.
Thank you for that. And I apologize, I didn't have slides. I'm going to be going through some bullet points that we have our info changes so frequently at this point that day by day, things are moving pretty rapidly with our COVID response. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Ambrose, Senior Director of External Affairs for the Baltimore City Health Department. And I just wanted to go through a bit about what our COVID responses looked like recently, especially we know, based at least on our email inboxes, that the big questions are all about the vaccine. So I'm going to go over what we're doing around the vaccine plan, what our efforts have been so far, where we're going over the next few weeks and months, where we're seeing bottlenecks and concerns, and then what we're still doing for COVID response outside of the vaccine process. So first of all, over the last few weeks, the city has been rolling out its COVID vaccine strategy. The goal for this strategy is to plan and implement a coherent, collaborative, and equitable approach to scaling up COVID-19 vaccination throughout Baltimore City. We're using a multi-level, multi-partner strategy focused on sort of 3 tiers of a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, the smallest chunk Our mobile response will be focused on mobile response and special populations that are harder to reach, which will primarily be addressed through the health department, hospital systems, community-based organizations, and similar entities going out and finding people who are harder to reach to get them vaccinated. The next level down in the pyramid is what's referred to as the standard healthcare model. And that's utilizing neighborhood-based organizations like federally qualified health centers or FQHCs, pharmacies, and other clinics based in the city's neighborhoods and communities to get vaccine out in a manner similar to the way you would get the flu vaccine if you went to a pharmacy. Finally, the largest chunk are our mass vaccination pod sites. You may have in the news recently, we have one located at Baltimore City Community College. The state is going to be standing up a couple of more. Those sites are operated and will be operated by the Baltimore City Health Department, the state health department, and through partnerships with hospital systems. So in Baltimore City, we're wrapping up the first month of our mass vaccination pod site. We started at Under Armour's Port Covington campus on January 5th, and then shifted to Baltimore City Community College this past Monday to get to a location that was a little bit more centrally located and more transit accessible. We're working with the state right now to stand up an additional site at M&T Bank Stadium for when vaccine capacity and supply allows, and I'll get into that math in a moment. And so recently announced this past Tuesday, they would be opening another mass vaccination site at the convention center by the end of next week. In addition to the mass vaccination sites that we're operating or standing up at the state, we've launched a citywide vaccination task force to focus on implementation strategy, working with external partners throughout our hospital systems and healthcare partners to continually expand capacity and build out infrastructure. But we're working with those partners, the hospital partners, to establish additional vaccine sites at their locations and to mobilize resources in support of those mobile vax teams that will need to get out to harder to reach populations. We've also established a work group with federally qualified health center partners and requested allocations out to FQHCs to help support vaccination of older adults. Additional doses were allocated there to those FQHCs this week for the first time based on our request. And finally, we've been working with our MAP call center to help older adults pre-register for slots for vaccine. The system used to register for appointments for vaccine, PrepMod, is determined by the state of Maryland. It's unfortunately an online-only system. So we identified that as an issue early on, and we're continuing to find ways to work around it. One of the first ways we've determined is a viable option is to use our MAP call center line that older adults without internet access can call to pre-register for slots to notify us of their interest, and then we call them back and help them walk them through the process as vaccine slots become available. Right now in Maryland, phases 1A, 1B, and 1C of the state's vaccine eligibility schedule are eligible. This past Tuesday, the governor announced the state estimates there are about 2 million people in phases 1A through 1C, meaning about 4 million shots are needed to complete vaccinations for that entire population. The governor announced on Tuesday the state had received over 700,000 doses so far, and they're receiving about 70,000 doses per week. So if you're doing the math at home, that means we've received just over 700,000. We need about 3.3 million more doses in order to get through phases 1A, 1B, and 1C. The state gets its vaccine doses from the federal government. The feds are buying their vaccine directly from Moderna and Pfizer and distributing it out to the states. So we were very excited at President Biden's announcement earlier this week that the federal government is buying an additional 200 million doses. But we do know it's going to take time for those doses to be produced and work their way down the supply chain to get out to local health departments, hospital systems, and others engaged in vaccination. So right now, the math is really not on the right side. Demand significantly exceeds supply, and likely will for the foreseeable future, based on what we've heard and seen from the governor over the last few weeks. That said, we do expect there to be a tipping point where supply will begin outstripping demand, and where we will start encountering vaccine hesitancy. We are already working on communications and community engagement efforts to address vaccine hesitancy now, so that as additional parts of our population become eligible for the vaccine, they won't be afraid of going to get their shots. So to that end, we've launched a citywide community engagement work group. We have begun developing communications that are honest and acknowledge what we know and what we don't know about the vaccine. We're going to be working with trusted messengers on message delivery and focus on messaging that addresses fears and concerns about the vaccine and tailor our messaging by community. While all of this is going on, we're continuing to support COVID-19 public testing sites, the Tri Support Center at the Lord Baltimore Hotel, which provides isolation assistance for those who've been exposed or tested positive, the Baltimore Health Corps contact tracing effort that was stood up this past summer, and partnerships in addition to those that help support food needs and other COVID-19 impacts. For up-to-date information that's updated daily, you can go to our coronavirus.baltimorecity.gov website, which includes a dashboard that has all of our city's metrics and data. You can also follow the Baltimore City Health Department on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. And then in addition to that, the city's Joint Information Center puts out a twice-weekly briefing, community briefing with critical updates and data and information. If you'd like to receive that update, I'm going to share an email in the chat for Allie Smith, who helps put that out. Email Allie directly and ask to be added to that listserv. And again, that goes out twice a week. I'll hold it till the end for questions.
Thank you, Jeff. I want to apologize. It looks like KD lost their connection, so she'll be hopping back on. In the meantime, we will jump right back over to our next guest, and that is Kim Clark from the Baltimore Development Corporation. Oh, and there goes KD. Looks like she's back on. Hey, KD. Kim?
Hi, everyone. First off, sorry about the light. I haven't figured it out. I moved down to my kitchen thinking that the light might be better. So I'm Kim Clark. I'm a proud resident of the 4th District. So thank you for hosting this, Councilman. Really appreciate it and happy to be here. I'm the Executive Vice President with Baltimore Development Corporation. I've been at BDC for about 22 years. Many community members may remember me when I was a Mayor Economic Development Officer, and we did the TIF at Belvedere Square for that revitalization. I was also the lead on the Senator Theater transition over to the multi-theater that it is now. So I've been pretty embedded in York Road. I live a block and a half away from the Alameda Shopping Center. So I am personally involved in a lot of the stuff that BDC does in the 4th District, which admittedly does focus on York Road because the 4th District is so heavily residential. But nonetheless, it's still very, very important to us, and we'll continue to focus on it. Since COVID started back in March and our team started teleworking, we have maintained our focus on economic development in the city. We continue to do the projects that we were working on, working with the businesses that we had been working with. Many people don't know that BDC also now has Made in Baltimore under its wing, and has had the emerging technology centers under our wing for as long as I've been at BDC. So since COVID, we started out actually really just talking to businesses, calling folks, mostly our smaller businesses, our mom and pops, our barbershops, and that sort of thing that had been closed down, and just talking to them, which was heartbreaking, but it was at least something we were doing. And then came the CARES Act money. And since we got the CARES Act money, we started 3 different initiatives with that CARES Act money. One was the small business grants, who many of you have heard about. With the CARES money, we gave out about 500 grants to small businesses. with a focus on our small neighborhood African-American businesses. And so 68% of those grants went to African-American owned businesses. The next tier down was city resident owned. So we worked really hard with that. Our next focus was on PPE. So we worked with our folks, mostly our makers in Baltimore City, that were able to, it's a word that's been utilized quite a bit since COVID started, and that's called pivot. So many of our businesses that could pivot to making PPE, we worked with them in twofold. One, we gave out grants that enabled folks, they maybe needed to add a piece of equipment onto their already production equipment, or hire an extra set of hands to operate the sewing machines for making of the masks. So and then the next step was we were engaged by Baltimore City to actually have these folks provide the PPE to our first responders. So the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management was heavily involved. So many of the masks that you see our police officers and fire department folks wearing were made by Baltimore City businesses, and we procured it. The masks, the facial shields were made here in Baltimore, and then even the gowns. We think of gowns sometimes as like evening wear, but it's actually the medical gowns that were provided were made by our local businesses. So that was a very successful program. We were able to increase employment for those small businesses and keep people working while providing PPE to our first responders. So that was really exciting. And then the third part was what we call D for D, or Design for Distancing. And that came out of the committee that was established in the then Mayor Young's office to say, what do we need to do, for our residents to still be able to go to restaurants and go out and meet folks? How can we do that safely? And so we engaged the Neighborhood Design Center to come up with a playbook, or design book, if you will, that lent some ideas for PPE in various business districts around the city. And then the business districts themselves had an entity, be it a business association, if they were part of a bid district, or an RBDL, or a Main Street. They took the lead on picking and choosing exactly what and where they wanted to do. So it ranged from, in Highlandtown, you'll have both in English and in Spanish stickers, door stickers on every retail establishment. It says, wear your mask, stay 6 feet apart. They also did some distancing along the sidewalks. And then they did some bench designs for folks waiting on bus stops and other places where people would typically gather and be very close together. They designed some very clever benches. In Station North, there were some very creative outdoor seating designed for the restaurants there. And on York Road, you saw that there's been some outside dining and also some crosswalk work that, unfortunately, because we got into the colder weather, had to stop, and we hope to pick back up as soon as the weather gets warmer. We had very limited funding for that, and we also had to follow the federal guidelines, which is as all of you know, listening, to the news, it's fits and starts with federal money, and the CARES Act money. It's one set of rules, and then 2 months later they changed the rules on us. So it was like, hurry up, get all the work done, and then, oh no, you've got a couple more months now. So our funding source and our reporting and all the rules that we have to follow are sent to us by the federal government and then by the city's Department of Finance, because it is city's CARES Act money that the city's getting out. So I've kind of been talking a lot and a little bit of rambling. Councilman, is there something else that you wanted me to touch on?
I think that was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. I think we'll open it up for questions at the end. And we can-
Okay, great.
Thank you so much. I really hope, you know, if some business owners are on, that they found some of that information valuable. And of course, like Councilman Mark Conway said, we will be taking questions at the end. Next, we'll hear from Allison Perkins Cohen from the Baltimore City School System. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Hello, how are you? Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. So hopefully you can see the presentation that David put up. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about our plans for more in-person learning. And thank you, Councilman, for inviting me. So I have a chance to present this and then answer any questions. David, next slide, please. So we've been, we've recently announced that we're expanding more in-person learning. And so that's kind of part of a continuation that we've been working on for many, many months. The importance of in-person learning is really critical, and we've seen that, we believe that from the beginning, but really seen it play out over time. And so we've really been committed to making sure that there are safe options for in-person learning for as many students as possible. And keyword there is option. This is about adding in-person options for families, and that families will still have the opportunity to participate in virtual learning if that's what they feel more comfortable with. But this is a progression of what we've been doing over many months. So we started with in-person learning in the summer. We served about 200 students then. In late September, we added some in-person learning, virtual learning sites where students could, it was just a safe place for students to go access their virtual learning. So there were 15 sites that served students from all over the city where they could have headphones. They had sound canceling headphones and computer and Wi-Fi access. And a proctor. We had amazing support from bus drivers and bus aides that supported creating a safe environment for those students to come and access their learning in a safe environment. And huge shout out to the Rec and Parks Department who partnered with us on that and just really just went way above and beyond to make that work for us, then flip their model of how they work normally to be able to support that. So that served about 1,000 students. At the same time, we provided some in-person opportunities for some of our most severely disabled students and English language learners. And then in early November, we expanded further to include our separate public day schools that again serve severely disabled students. And our early learning programs for special ed students. We really are trying to focus on the students for whom virtual learning is most challenging. And we saw that in the sign up for the student learning centers, is that a lot of the families who chose that were parents of students with disabilities. So it really brought home to us how that is a need that, it's hard enough to teach your kindergartner how to read at home, but if your kindergartner is also autistic, for example, that makes it really hard. So oh, sorry, David, go back just a little bit. Just one more. I'm sorry. I'll move faster. I know you guys have a big agenda, but so anyway, we saw that and so really tried to focus on students most in need. And so also in November, we opened up the all K programming at a group of about 40 schools. And then now we're ready to expand further. So David, perfect. If you could move to the next slide. We're talking about in February 16th, expanding to kindergarten through second grade in all schools. And then on March 1st, also expanding to grades 3 through 5 in all schools, and grades 9 and 12 also on March 1st. And again, reminder that this would be a choice for families who think this is the best option for them. And if they want to remain virtual, they can. Next slide. So one question is, why? There is the health indicators in Baltimore City are not what any of us would like. With the COVID continues to be a real concern, and so it's something we watch very carefully. But as I indicated before, we really feel like this moment requires drastic action, that there are students for whom this really isn't working well. And we're seeing that in a number of ways. And we need to provide an in-person option for those families who feel like this is what's needed for their child. We take the health metrics really seriously. We partner with health. We have a health advisory group that has representation from experts, epidemiologists, doctors, from public health experts from Morgan, from University of Maryland Medical System, from Hopkins, and we meet with them every other week. I actually met with them today to talk about where we were. And then on a weekly basis, I meet with the health department. So I meet with Dr. Duraza and her fabulous staff to go over the health metrics every week to make sure that we're good there. Part of the reason that we have that ramp up that I showed you, where we started in the summer with 200 students, we got to about 1,000 students in late September. We got to about 3,000 students that we serve in person now, and then are starting with K2 in mid-September, and then 3-5, is because we've really worked hard with our health advisory group, with the health department, to develop really sound standard health and safety measures that are, our standard operating procedures, to make sure that we can do this safely. So we think we've done that, and we have a track record that shows that. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there are, key pieces we put in place that we think we can do this safely, and so meet students' needs while keeping everybody safe. So vaccine access is something that is, Jeff talked about a minute ago, and I'll talk about it in a minute too. We have some partnerships there to help with that and to provide some greater access to vaccines. We also have done a lot of work on ventilation. So we have 8,300 air purifiers and MERV 13 filters that we've installed in our schools. I think one refrain we've heard from folks a lot is that city schools buildings are older. And so can you really ensure that the air quality is good in those buildings? And that's a legitimate question. Our buildings are older. We have been underfunded for generations in our buildings. And so that is a challenge. And because of that, we have very seriously focused on what it takes to get those buildings ready to serve students. So we have invested in MERV 13 filters, which is what the ASHRAE standards indicate you need in order to filter out. They're a denser filter that really provides more filtration for the air. And so in buildings that have the capacity to handle those MERV 13 filters, those are being installed. And in buildings that don't have air conditioning systems or don't have capacity to handle that, we will install air purifiers, which also meet ASHRAE standards to keep the air circulating in those rooms safe as well. We've also kept small classrooms and keep students in pods whenever we can, so that we kind of know who's in groups, and that we can and keep the limited exposure between individuals. And then since September 28th, we've really held ourselves accountable for monitoring our data to make sure that we're safe. And so we monitor the number of COVID cases we have, as well as the number of transmissions. And that's the metric that I think is really important and we should be held accountable for. COVID is in the community, and we can't prevent people from getting COVID, just like we can't prevent people from getting a cold or the flu. But what we can prevent is we can have mitigation strategies that make it less likely, or hopefully, virtually unlikely to happen, that you would have a transmission in a school. So a transmission would be if I have COVID and I work with Jeff, say, and Jeff and I get it today, and 2 days later Jeff gets it, then and we were close contacts of each other, then I gave it to Jeff. That would be a transmission. We so far in our in-person learning sites, we've had 0 transmissions. We've had 1 in our meal sites, and that's going back to September 28th. And so I don't know if we'll always keep it at 0, but I'm hoping it'll keep very close to 0. And that's a way to really measure what we're doing. And it's the kind of thing, if it started changing, we would talk with our health advisors and the health department about, and maybe change course. Next slide. So again, this is getting to the urgency of what we're seeing. So we are just seeing a real change in the outcomes for students. And this is not unique to Baltimore. You're seeing it across the country, is that the student performance is suffering. This is talking about students failing one or more courses in their first quarter. So a significant uptick from what we saw in the first quarter last year in all these grades. Really big increase in ninth grade we're seeing. So 68% of students have failed at least one course in ninth grade. And ninth grade we know to be a really important bellwether for high school completion. And so students who are not on track in ninth grade are much less likely to complete high school successfully. And so we are worried that we're losing a generation of students here, and we need to take serious action to make sure that doesn't happen. Next slide. These are more indicators of high school GPA. So this is the percent of students with GPAs of 1.0 or below. And again, you see a drastic change from last year to this year that we need to figure out how we address. And you look at some of the subgroups below and some of the rates there that we're concerned about. Next slide. Social emotional impact is a big issue too. I mean, we're hearing it from families and parents a lot about students who are just feeling like they're not connected to their students. They're feeling isolated, to their friends, they're isolated, and we're seeing real challenges there. Erica Green did a really compelling article in the New York Times that was in, I think, on Monday about Clark County, Nevada, which is seeing just significant increases in suicide rates of students. And so they're trying to bring students back because they're concerned about that. And that is a trend that people are seeing across the country. And so we are very concerned about making sure that students have a way to connect, and being in person is one of the critical ways to do that. Next slide. So I talked earlier about, safety measures that we've refined and put in place over this time since the summer when we've been doing this. And during this time, again, we've had 0 transmissions. We implement all 5 CDC mitigation strategies. So that's the highest standard you can have under the CDC. And we have all 5 of those pieces in place. Next slide. In addition to that, we also have some other pieces in place. So I talked about the ventilation earlier. So we have really sound ventilation work in place. I don't think I mentioned earlier that in the next week or so, we will have a dashboard up where families can look at the ventilation strategy that's in place in their child's classroom and the status of implementing that, so that people can kind of track and check and see and make sure that they feel comfortable with that. For testing and vaccines, so we've been very fortunate to have a partnership with the University of Maryland Medical System for daily on-site COVID testing. So UMS is the entity who runs the convention center testing site, and if you've ever been there, it's a great place to get tested. They are really well organized and very caring individuals there. So every day we have a van that goes to the convention center, picks up the public health, the health experts from there, and then takes it out to our sites, drives them out to our sites where we have any students or staff who have COVID-like symptoms. They go out to the school, they take a COVID test of the individual with the symptoms as well as any close contacts. That gets sent to the UMS lab, and we get the response back so that we know whether the individual has COVID. We are also working right now, had several meetings today about expanding that. So that's a pretty robust testing strategy already, and just so grateful to UMS for that partnership. And then we're working also on expanding it to include more asymptomatic testing. And so we'll probably be announcing that soon, but we're looking at things like saliva-based testing, self-administered saliva-based testing for staff, and possibly some pool testing for at the lower grades. So then we also have this partnership with Johns Hopkins that we announced last week, where they're focusing on some vaccine access for city school staff. So they are doing up to 500 vaccines a week for our staff. And so we started that. We announced that on Martin Luther King Day, and since then have invited about 5,000 staff to have access to the vaccine. About 2,000 have signed up, saying they would like access to the vaccine, and so those staff are moving through the process. We've prioritized those who've been in person the longest, so we prioritize meal service workers and custodians. They have been out in person since March, and then also the folks who are in person now, teaching at the separate public day schools and other places. And then at this point, the invitations have gone to nearly everybody who's returning on February 16th, and started to move through, I think gotten pretty far through the folks who are invited to are being expected to return March 1st. We also have a partnership with around vaccines. They've adopted 8 schools they have partnerships with, and they've offered vaccines to all those 8. And then we're looking forward to the expanded vaccine offerings at the convention center. All of this, as Jeff mentioned, is dependent on supply. So we're watching that closely. But our one thing I want to say too is that our plan to reopen and the approval of that plan by our health advisory group and by the health department predates this partnership on the vaccines and all the progress we've made on vaccines. So they were comfortable with our opening based on our track record of our implementation of our health and safety standards before the vaccine. So the vaccines are wonderful. We're excited about the vaccines, and we're doing everything we can to get people vaccines, and we can open safely without the vaccines. I think that might be the end. David, is that it? Oh, air purifiers. Just more about air purifiers. Like this is referencing that the dashboard with the regular updates will be launched in the next few weeks. And that was it.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Allison. Thank you so much. That was thorough. Thank you so much. Well, next we'll have Ms. Tisha Edwards. Thank you for being so patient, Ms. Tisha. We're excited to hear from the office.
Thank you, KD. You're approaching my bedtime, so I'm glad that you called me up. So thank you so much for having me as a part of the District 4 Town Hall, and congratulations to Councilman Conway in his new leadership role in the district. And I'm very confident he's going to do amazing work with the community, and happy to be a part of the community of support for District 4. So I was asked to really talk about the agency's COVID response and some of the things that we are doing from a direct services perspective for the community. And I'm going to focus on our CAP Center located on York Road, because that is a community-based resource that is there really to help families get through this really, really challenging time. Next slide. So at our CAP centers, we are focusing on 4 key resources, especially in COVID, and trying to help families to get through this very challenging economic downturn. So we are operating the city's eviction prevention program. We also are supporting utility bill assistance. We've always had the energy assistance program at our CAP centers. It is crisis season. BGE has started to send out termination letters. And so we're really encouraging the community to take advantage of energy assistance. We have the resources, they belong to the community. And so we just want to make sure everyone knows about that. We are also the agency that administers the water bill assistance, the BH2O program, in partnership with DPW. We are the client-facing resource to help individuals, again, who need it, to get a subsidy on their water bill. And finally, guess what? It's tax season. So we are also the place where you can go to get free tax assistance, which begins in a couple of weeks on February 8th. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about eviction prevention, and I just want to first remind everyone, everything that I'm saying to you this evening It's very simple. Go to our website, BeMoreChildren.com. Again, BeMoreChildren.com. On these slides, you're going to see a lot of different websites, and you're going to see a lot of different phone numbers, but there's really only two ways, or there are two best ways to access the resources through the CAP Center. You can either go on our website, BeMoreChildren.com, and it will take you to every one of these programs, or you can call the CAP Centers at 410-545-0900. Again, that's 410-545-0900, and I will drop that into the chat. But let's start with eviction prevention. Super, super important. We have resources to help individuals to stay in their homes. We do not want families to become homeless. We want to support housing stability in our community. And the city already has set aside $28 million for eviction prevention resources. And we're accepting applications today. And I'm really proud to say that in District 4, we've already approved more than 400 eviction prevention applications. We provided back rent to landlords to keep your neighbors, our neighbors, in their homes. We're doing that work already. But we know that there are more people who need this resource. Actually, District 4 is probably one of the districts that has utilized this resource the most. So we are glad that folks in District 4 are comfortable asking for help, because we're here and we know that we are a prideful people. We don't want a handout. We're accustomed to taking care of ourselves. Guess what? Everybody needs help, and these resources belong to you. And District 4 has done a great job of starting to access the eviction prevention program. But I just want to remind people that those resources continue to be there. And so outlined on this slide, there's information that we need from the tenant and from the landlord. And once we receive documentation from both parties, that is how we move you through the process. It's a tenant initiated process. So if you are a tenant and you are renting and you are back on your rent and you're facing eviction, you need to go on our website, BeMoreChildren.com, fill out an application, submit the documentation showing that you've had a COVID-19 income impact, and then you got to work with your landlord so that your landlord submits his or her information, and then we can take you through the process. Next slide, please. As I said, at our CAP Centers, we've always offered energy assistance. That's in partnership with the state of Maryland. You can go on the state of Maryland website at mydhrbenefits.dhr.state.mdus, or you can just go to our website, BeMoreChildren.com. There is a page, and that page will take you directly into the process. So you don't have to worry about all of these phone numbers, but it is a state partnership. Again, resources are there. If you've gotten a turn-off notice from BGE, you need to give us a call and you need to let us help you. Next slide. The same applies for water bill assistance. The city has a program that provides a assistance on your water bill if you're having challenges paying it. There is income threshold, but we are asking anyone who needs help to please apply. Again, there's a lot of websites on this page, but really the real answer is just go to BeMoreChildren.com, 410-545-0900, and we can help you. So in one location, you can do eviction prevention, energy assistance, and water bill assistance, all with one agency, a one-stop process for assistance. So, please reach out to us. As I said, the resources are there. Next slide. And finally, as I said, we're getting ready to kick off tax season. Everything that we're doing is remote. So I know that's a challenge for folks, but we do have that call center. The call center is open from 8:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon. And you can call into the call center and you can get assistance. You can have an application mailed out to you. You can have someone help you do the application over the phone. You can also drop off any documents. We have a drop box right outside the door because we are unfortunately not seeing the public, but we are providing services. Every day we get on an average about 500 calls to our CAP center. So we have a system to take your call, help you over the phone, and move you through the process, even in COVID, although that we're not open for the public. And the same applies for the tax program. We're going to be able to do all of that virtually this year. So if you need assistance completing your taxes for free, please, please, please use the CAP Center. This is a time when we need to save all of our coins, right? And we need to be as resourceful as possible. And so again, the CAP Centers are a one-stop location where you can get access to all of those resources, and then you can take your dollars and spend them on other really important things that your family might need. Next slide. The Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success is also responsible for supporting the citywide emergency food program. We've been doing this since last March. It has been an extraordinary process. We're very grateful to be able to have done this. Our commitment was that no one goes hungry during the pandemic. And so we've been working very hard to leverage a wide range of resources in order to make sure that families do not go hungry and that food is readily accessible to them. Next slide. We're very proud of this work because it's partnership driven. None of this is just the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. Everything that we do is interagency. Everything that we do is community-based. Everything that we do is partner driven. And that is what allows us to have the reach that we have. So we're very grateful for all of the partners who've been a part of this process. And I've listed those for you on the slide. As of today, the city has invested almost $30 million in feeding Baltimore since the pandemic. And I just want to lift up our core values for this work because the why is so important. It's important for you to know that we care about our neighbors. And so this team, all of the agencies, and you can name them, Rec and Parks, the Health Department, Department of General Services, the Department of Housing and Community Development, all of us have come together to execute this strategy. And we feel very strongly that we needed to increase food assistance to meet the high need. We needed to provide food supplements across age groups and geographic areas. We're so thankful that the school system is using its infrastructure to provide meals to children every day. But we know that children are not the only people in the community who needed access to food. And so it was important that we had a strategy that was for elderly, for children, for families, and anybody else that was food insecure. We also feel very strongly that we want to offer residents food and grocery choice. Just because you need a helping hand doesn't mean that you shouldn't have choice. So we've worked as hard as we possibly could to try to have some variety. We wish there were more, but that is important to us in this process. And we've also worked very hard to reach underserved residents, oftentimes overlooked by mass distribution channels, like our immigrant community. A lot of times they are hesitant to access government benefits because of all of the pressures and all of the concerns that they have about their immigration status. So we wanted to do this work in a way that it was very community centric and that we really looked for pockets of populations of folks who sometimes did not take advantage of government resources. And then finally, but most importantly, we want to retain agency and dignity. That's very important to us as an agency, but to me personally. I'm a person who grew up on food stamps. I'm a person who's had to go to a soup kitchen, and I understand when you do that, you want no shame, you want no judgment, and you want to be treated with dignity. And so everything that we do within our food strategy is really about that. Next slide. So this just gives you an overview of some of the current food resources. We have produce boxes. We have about 11,000 produce boxes circulating in the city at any given time. We have mixed boxes, which includes dairy, meat, and produce. That's another additional 7,000 boxes moving across the city. And then we have our grocery boxes, which are really focused on our older senior citizen community. And those are actually delivered to the home. Next slide. And I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of our food sites in District 4. I want to give a shout out to the Italian Cultural Center. Many of you may know Monica. She is amazing. And she just does so much work on behalf of the community. Victorious Ministries, Leaf Walk Elementary, and Walter P. Carter Elementary. Those are the food sites in District 4. We appreciate their partnership. And the last thing I want to say is if you need this information, go to our website, BeMoreChildren.com, or give us a call, 410-545-0900. Thank you, KD.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank you.
all
That was
for,
super duper helpful.
Yeah.
Hey everyone.
So,
Oh, Katie, did you want to say one last thing?
yep, I was just about to introduce you, so you're right on it.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you everyone for sending in some great questions. It's okay with the panelists. I'll just kind of call on you and ask the question, and you know, let's try and keep it short. I know we're trying to end close to 7:30. First, I wanted to ask Jeff from the health department. We've had a lot of questions about seniors and making sure seniors can access the vaccine, can get updated information. Also, disabled constituents want to make sure that they have a method of contacting the health department and are part of the health department strategy. So, wondering if you could talk a bit about that.
Sure, and I'll lead with I need to get back to you regarding disabled residents to gain more information there. I can tell you for older adults, as I mentioned earlier, we've developed a workaround to the system being online only for appointments. That's for older adults to call the MAP call center, Maryland Access Point, if they do not have internet access, and we will work through that with them to make sure that they're able to sign up. The phone number for that is 410-396-2273. 410-396-2273. And again, that's only for adults over the age of 60. Right now, the vaccine eligibility extends into phase 1C, which captures adults over the age of 65. So right now, if you're over the age of 65, you don't have internet access, you're struggling to sign up for a vaccine slot, give us a call at 410-396-2273.
Great, thank you so much. I also wanted to ask, I think we still have Captain Shorter on. Someone had asked about the recent announcement, I think it was yesterday, by the mayor about changing up the microzone strategy, and just wondering if you could speak to maybe how that affects the Northern District. If you've been read into that.
Yes. So we had initially several microzones that were covered in the Northern District. So people, you need to keep in mind that the Northern District is the second largest district in the city. So we went from 10 to 8, and we combined a couple of the microzones into one larger microzone as opposed to being broken or staggered. And then primarily stayed in the same place from the top of York Road and to the bottom of Charles Village, which is like 20th and Maryland, the Pimlico area, and the Alameda Shopping Center as one of the microzones as well. It allows us to still, like I said before, the where didn't really change. The how doesn't change, but just the why. So the why was because of the crime data that's been collected over the past, I guess, 24 to 48 months to show where the crime spikes, patterns, trends, or clusters happen to pop up. So our focus hasn't changed. And the areas where we still police the same, they'll still get the same coverage. It's not a lot that really changed about the microzones. Some, I think they merged them because it didn't make sense to have 15 to 20 microzones in a district when they were all over the place. They were scattered. As now they're more focused, so police officers can know exactly what they're supposed to do, how long they're supposed to be doing it, where they're supposed to be doing it, and why. So that the message has been streamlined from the top down. So we all have a better understanding and idea of where to be and why we're there, if that answers your question.
Yep. Thank you so much. Wanted to direct a question over to Allison with City Schools. There's been a lot of discussion. I think you spoke to this a little bit about how virtual learning has been challenging, and how there have been some kind of pitfalls that people have encountered. I was wondering, I guess, as we transition into this reopening, if there will be sort of continued efforts around improving the virtual learning experience for those who don't opt into in person, and maybe talk about some of your efforts around connecting students with the internet who may kind of have trouble traditionally connecting in their home with online classes.
Yeah, great question. So yes, we've been continuing to work on improving virtual learning. It is still going to be a big component of what we're doing. So we need to keep working on how do we make it better. So that's been a focus of professional learning that's been continuing. Today there was professional learning on that, and we'll keep working to try to support how to make that more effective. I think there's, many teachers are just doing a fantastic job, and they're working a crazy amount to try to make this work. And some of them are just really so skilled at this. So we've seen that trajectory. And so we're going to keep working to support that and spread that knowledge. And even with that, there are still just a number of students for whom it's just not working. In terms of your question, David, about the access, we've done a lot to provide additional access to students. We've purchased 55,000 laptops and Chromebooks and distributed about, I think it's about 50,000 of those to students. Hotspots, we have a lot of hotspots. We distributed about 10,000 hotspots to families. We have about another 5,000 on hand now, with more coming. We've also worked with Comcast to make to help folks with the Internet Essentials program and paying the monthly payment for students if they need help paying for their monthly Comcast. Enrolling folks in that program. So the T-Mobile partnership has been really critical with these hotspots. And so if there are families who need that, they should certainly reach out to us. There's information on our website about how to sign up for that. We do have more hotspots, and we can make those available. And the other thing I would flag that I think sometimes people may not think about is that sometimes a family, especially if you have multiple people in your household trying to log on, a single hotspot may not be enough. So if you have multiple children trying to log on at the same time, you may need to come and get a second hotspot. So if you have a hotspot, but it's still, you've got sketchy connectivity or it's coming in and out or it's slow, then also reach out to us, because we could get you a second hotspot if you have more children in your household and it's really not sufficient in order to meet your needs. Because that's something I think we're seeing too, is that people have connectivity, or if you don't have a hotspot, you have your own connectivity, but it's slow and it's not providing you the it's interrupted in a way that's making virtual learning difficult, then again, to Tisha's point, like we're here to provide that support. We have that support for this reason. Nobody expected to be in a situation where you've got 4 or 5 people working all day on computers from home. And so this is a situation none of us expected to be in. And so the support is here for you. And so please take advantage of it and come get a hotspot if the connectivity that is in your house is really not is really frustrating and making it difficult and bumping you off all the time. That's not working well for virtual learning either. So we need to make sure that we get you the support that you need to be successful.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to direct the next question to the councilman himself. Someone was wondering if you could talk a little bit kind of broad, big picture, what you think the kind of strengths of the 4th districts are, what the opportunities are going forward, and what some of the challenges are that we're facing.
Sure. It's a great question. And, as I think about it, we have a number of strengths as a district. We have very strong and engaged communities and community associations. We are probably one of the most civically active parts of the city. And I think that's part of what makes us successful in a lot of the stuff that we're able to do. And I think it's really going to help us moving forward. When we set our minds toward things, we have the willpower and the organization to get there. I've seen that from a number of organizations that I've worked with along the way. We also happen to be technically one of the safest parts of the city. But then I'll jump into one of our weaknesses. Unfortunately, because of where we are in the city, we're so close to the county. We're not really compared to the rest of the city. We're often compared to the safety of the county, and so the expectations are a little bit higher for us as a district, and they should be high. Folks want to be safe no matter where they are in this district, and they should be. So we are constantly sort of challenged by our border, that being in the county. I think another one of our major weaknesses is our lack of food options for folks. We live in a food desert, one of the largest food deserts in the district, and it's something that I've talked about frequently in community association meetings and on doors. And it's something we desperately need to fix. We are a mostly residential district. We have a lot of strong communities, strong neighborhoods, strong families, but we're missing a few of those key staples that allow communities to thrive. And those things are fixable. I think opportunities, one of the big opportunities that we have in front of us is organizing our business community. I think the bid was an attempt to do that. I think we want to be thoughtful in how we do that to make sure we meet the needs of our businesses, especially given the challenges of COVID. But as we hopefully in the not too distant future turn out of this pandemic, we have an opportunity to hopefully thrive thereafter. And I want to make sure that we take advantage of that, and we're thinking a few steps down the line as opposed to just thinking about what's right in front of us. We also have 2 21st century schools. We have Walter P. Carter opening up very soon, and kids will be in that building, and it's huge. It's a big, beautiful school, brand new everything, and I'm really excited about the prospect that it offers our children. And we've got Govans Elementary that is still being worked on. We're one of the few. I want to say the only district in the city that's got 2 21st century schools. I may be wrong. Allison can correct me. But we're very fortunate from that perspective. And I think it'll be a big draw for the district going forward, to attract families, to give our young people a strong opportunity to succeed. So I'm really excited about that opportunity. I think some of the threats, so I alluded to the expectations for the 4th district. And one of the threats there is around violence. So we are one of the safest parts of the city, but the violence, it still exists. It still exists mainly along our major corridors. And if we're we need to get on top of that. We need to address those issues. But yeah, those are some of the things I'm thinking about so far as our SWOT analysis.
Great. Thanks so much. I think we're going to do one last question. We do want to be respectful of people's time tonight. Thank you to all of our amazing presenters. And this is a question that one person asked, but I know has been on a lot of people's mind. I've heard it a couple times over the past few weeks about our district office. And so I'll lob that over to Vidishani.
Hi there, folks. Yes, so our district office will be staying. We're working really hard to maintain that. We're right now we're being remote because of the pandemic, and we want to keep all our families safe. So until we're back in the office, please reach out via email or our phones. We're happy to get in contact with us. But as soon as we're back to being in person, our plan is to be back in the office. And David has kept track of all the questions that you've asked, and if there are questions that we have missed and we couldn't get to, or there are questions specific for the office or the team and really nuanced, please know that we'll be getting in touch with you individually in the next coming days with answers to them. And if you have more questions that come up, I'll reach out to the office and we'll be in touch.
Yes, and thank you so much for joining us. I just want to echo what David and Vidishani said. Thank you so much, our amazing presenters, taking the time to present to us tonight. Very enthusiastic about joining and presenting to the 4th District constituents. Thank you to the 4th District constituents for attending. This would not happen without you. So thank you for keeping your attention. I look forward to the coming years. Follow Councilman Mark Conway on all social channels, and also subscribe to that awesome newsletter.
And one more thing, KD, I want to thank you guys. You guys pulled this together and did a bang up job making it work well. So thank the 4th District staff, Vidishani, Kashana, and David for doing an excellent job pulling together our panel and organizing this whole thing. I couldn't have done it without you. I really appreciate my team. And I'm lucky to have them. The 4th District is lucky to have such dedicated public servants to help us get where we need to be. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you guys too. Thank you, Councilman. And I know that David is a former student of City Schools. I'm not sure about Kashana. Are you Kashana?
Oh, yes.
Hey,
Western, only the best. Sorry, that's my high school.
You said Western?
Yes.
Nice. So you're a dove. Thank you.
All right. Well, good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you for attending.
Great job.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.